Hey everyone, Chris here from Organic Health, and welcome to today's interview. We are very lucky to be chatting with Melissa Doman, the founder of Melissa Doman Sleep Consulting. Melissa is a certified sleep sense consultant, and if you are a parent watching and you just think that getting 3 hours sleep a night is just part of being a new parent, this discussion could be a game changer. Melissa is personally trained under sleep expert Dana Obleman, and she has helped families around the world teach their babies, infants, and toddlers good, healthy sleep habits and how to sleep right through the night. And Melissa is a Temple University graduate, graduating magna cum laude, and in 2006 she went to go work at the Institute for the Achievement of Human Potential, which is one of the world's leading centers for early childhood development. Melissa is fully trained in motor therapies for special needs children, as well as also coaching parents from around the world who have well babies how to develop and foster a love of learning, physical activity, and how to accelerate brain growth and development. Melissa, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
So Melissa, just to dive right in, I was actually just chatting to a friend of mine last week who's a new parent, and he was just saying that once you get used to only having 3 hours sleep a night, being a new parent is actually not that bad.
Yeah.
But based on your research and what your work, it seems that there might be another way where you can actually have your baby have a full night's sleep.
Absolutely. And anytime that I start working with a family, I'm there to say, it doesn't have to be this way. I think a lot of parents that I talk to, they feel like sleeplessness has to be part of the job description, and it doesn't have to be. And the great news is that parents can teach their babies to sleep through the night really well. And it's a very empowering thing. Parents say, like, I did it. All I do is I give parents the tools and I coach them through it, but they're the ones doing all the work. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind is that the first 3 months of life, sleep is a little bit more disruptive just because babies just go through cycles throughout the day. They don't quite know what's daytime, what's nighttime. So at night, yeah, it's going to be a little disruptive. But after about 14 weeks, that baby, if all is going great, that baby will start to sleep for longer and longer stretches at night, and they're not going to be requiring as many feeds and things like that. That's simply just because their brain and their body are starting to learn this is daytime when it's bright out, and this is nighttime when it's really dark. And when it's dark, I got to sleep.
And what are some of the drawbacks of getting poor quality sleep for babies and small children?
Okay. Well, I mean, the short term of it is that when you have to deal with that kid the next day, they're grumpy, they're irritated. For parents of toddlers and older kids that I've worked with, they can just lose it at a drop of a hat. They will just have meltdowns, temper tantrums. So in the short term, if a child is not sleeping well, they're not very happy. And I think you could probably say the same thing about any adult. When you haven't slept all that well, you don't feel your best the next day.
True.
Sure. A neurological and developmental level, there are definitely drawbacks. When a child is sleeping, as they start to go into later stages of sleep, this is the time where the brain network is really securing and solidifying itself. It's making itself stronger. So when you have brain cells, obviously, but each brain cell has branches that come off and attach to other brain cells. And what happens is then that later stage of sleep, those branches, they start to get stronger and stronger. They actually compress, which is really good for cell growth and restoration, okay? But as you go into REM sleep, so at the last stage of sleep, it's the cortex's way of organizing itself. So it's taking what information it learned that day and saying what's important here and what stuff is not so important, okay? So from a brain growth and developmental standpoint, it's really important. And obviously for older kids, as they start to get to become school age, it's also really important for school performance, memory, retention, things like that. And also, sleep is a really important time for the brain to be producing growth hormones. So that's when a child is growing at night. So if they're not getting the good quality sleep that they need, it can be affecting a lot of other things. And for parents of newborns and babies, if that baby is sleeping well at night, things like quality of feeds, naps during the day are going to be much better as well. So if they're not sleeping well at night, it's going to affect the next 24-hour cycle. It's not just going to affect the next morning or the next afternoon.
Okay. Wow. So vital. Okay. And then you trained under sleep expert Dana Obleman. What was it you liked about her approach?
Well, working at the institutes, you know, we live by the philosophy that kids are geniuses.
Yeah.
They can learn anything. And I think when I first read her book, what I was thinking the whole time is just that, you know, she recognizes that kids are really intelligent. And that for that older kid, that toddler, they're ultimate negotiators. They know exactly how to get what they want. But also that at a very young age, you can teach really good sleep habits. You can teach them the importance of routine. You can teach them why you have to go to sleep at night. And again, I come from a philosophy that you can teach a child anything. So that's what really spoke to me when I first learned about it, that you know, she clearly just has a lot of respect for kids, and that, you know, they need all the support that they can get. And, you know, parents can do all that work. Parents are the ones that are teaching their kids that, which is also really important. For, you know, again, from the institutes, parents can do all the work. They teach their kids everything.
Yes. So now to now focus on some specific questions from parents that have come in. The first one is, any tips for making a nursery conducive to good quality sleep?
Yeah, number one, make it really dark. Okay. If the darker that it is, the better, just because our bodies are so sensitive to light. I know even right now, I don't have my blackout curtain up, and I've been waking up at 6 o'clock every morning just because that little crack of light is coming through and waking me. But for kids who are not sleeping well, you have to make sure that the environment is conducive for sleep. And that is make it as dark as possible. You want it to be a struggle to find your way to the crib or to the bed if you have to go into your child's room. And then the next thing is that you have to keep it kind of boring as well. You know, a lot of times when I'm looking at a kid's nursery, some parents will ask me to do a nursery evaluation, and I'm happy to do it. And I look, and the crib's full of toys, and there are toy boxes everywhere, and it's like, no, make it as boring as possible, because your child, their only choice should be just go to sleep.
Okay. All
right. So if they have other things in there to distract them, then it's not going to be as easy. Now, I do recommend that if the child is old enough, that you can have 1 or maybe 2 toys in there that your child will start to associate with sleep. So if it's a teddy bear or a stuffed animal, that's fine. And actually, if that is a toy that they keep in their crib, the better, because their brain and body will associate that thing with sleep. Just like we have a pillow and a blanket, without those things, we'd have a hard time sleeping. And those are really good examples of sleep props. So at 1 or 2 toys are okay. But other than that, you just want to keep it nice and boring.
Touched on sleep props. One of the questions is, what are sleep props? Can we just chat a bit about that?
Sure.
How that works?
So a sleep prop is basically something that your brain and your body associate with sleep. So perfect example, pillow and blanket. We have all made it a habit that we need a pillow and blanket to fall asleep. We don't even think twice about it, but that is the case, okay? And for kids and for young toddlers, a lovey or a toy, totally fine. That's a great sleep prop. But where you come to have problems, and any child that I've worked with who has a sleep problem, they're dependent on some kind of external prop where they need mom and dad for it, okay? So mom and dad can be the prop. So feeding, rocking, cradling, walking around the nursery 5 times. These are all external props where they need mom and dad. But something even as simple as a pacifier. If a baby falls asleep with the pacifier, but it falls out of their mouth at night, if they fell asleep that way and they wake up and they realize the pacifier is not there, they may not have the manual competence yet to find where that pacifier is and put it back in their mouth. So they're going to call mom or dad to say, I need it.
By crying.
Yeah, exactly, by crying, exactly. And you have other things like they have baby swings where you can turn it on and automatically it just starts to swing back and forth. You know, for an infant or a newborn, that's, you know, they can fit in that, that's okay. But once that baby becomes 6, 7, 8 months old, they're too big for it. And if they've been dependent on that to fall asleep, then, you know, it can cause a lot of disruption. And then lastly, I always say like a car seat or the car or the stroller. There are some babies that have just learned the only way they can fall asleep is if they're strapped into that car seat or stroller. And, you know, certainly we've all heard the worst case scenario stories where, you know, mom has to put baby in the car, drive around the block 4 times until that baby falls asleep. And then she slowly has to make that transition back up to the crib. So again, you want to teach that baby, that infant, that toddler, that they can sleep independently. So if there's any kind of prop like that where they need mom or dad, they're not going to learn how to self-soothe themselves to sleep at night.
Cool. It makes sense. Next up we have, could you give an example of a good pre-bedtime routine for babies and then for small kids?
So a bedtime routine should not take any more than 30 minutes. The only exception to that is that if a parent has twins or kids who, you know, more than one child, even then you can try and figure out a way to do the routines at the same time, but it depends. But 30 minutes is like the nice number because it's enough of a runway to get the body to relax and get ready for sleep. But it's not too long that you're drawing out the process, and you're less likely to have your child to start getting drowsy or even fall asleep during the routine. So 30 minutes is a really good time. A perfect example of a routine is you start with a bath. Doesn't have to be very long, just a few minutes. You pop on a diaper after that. You put on PJs. If the child is old enough, you might brush teeth. And then, you know, finish the routine with reading. Okay, so read a book. You might even want to read the same book that just because that will start to strengthen that brain and body connection with sleep. But for babies, depending on their age, you do want to keep a feed into the bedtime routine. Now, obviously for an infant, they have tiny stomachs. They can't hold too much. So you want to top them off and make sure that they're really nice and well fed before going to sleep. But you have to be careful with that as well. Sometimes when the feed is too close to the time that they actually are supposed to fall asleep, babies will start to fall asleep when feeding. And then what happens is that they learn the only way they can fall asleep is with a feed.
That was actually going to bring me on to the next question is why is it not advised to nurse before babies fall asleep? And you're just answering that.
Here's the thing. Let's say, for example, a baby does fall asleep when they're feeding,
yeah.
Okay? Typically what happens is that mom stops the feed. They make that gentle transition into the crib. If mom is lucky, baby will stay asleep and then she can sneak out of there. But what happens is that when that baby is finished a sleep cycle, they actually come to a point of being aware. They're actually awake briefly, but if the child knows how to self-soothe themselves, they can easily go back to sleep. But what happens is that when that baby is awake, they wake up thinking like, I was with mom, I was feeding, what happened? And the way I explain it to my parents is that it's as if you fell asleep in your bed and then you wake up in the middle of the night and you're outside in the garden, okay? It can be very startling. And for babies, because they don't have the language yet to say, where the heck am I? What do? They cry for mom.
Okay.
They cry for mom or they cry for dad to say, hey, I had you when I fell asleep. I need that to go back to sleep. So that's where the big struggle is. And, you know, once parents can teach their babies to sleep independently, when they do come out of those sleep cycles throughout the night, they're on their own, they can self-soothe themselves, and they just turn over and they go back to sleep, just like you and I would.
Great, and that brings me on to our next question. How do you actually do that? How, in terms of sleep training, any tips for parents looking to train their little ones how to do that, to self-soothe, as you mentioned?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, if mom or dad have been the prop, or if there's something else that has been the prop, it's simply a matter of just saying, we're not going to use this anymore, but I'm going to guide you through that journey of learning how to fall asleep on your own. So I have a couple of strategies how to do it. And depending on the child's age, I would change my strategy based on that. But for the most part, what I do is I teach parents that they're going to be there in the room, but only temporarily. And from night one, if picking up, if feeding has been the prop, it has to stop from the get-go. It can't be a gradual thing just because it causes a lot of confusion for that baby or toddler. So if you try and do it, say, like 2 nights a week, you're not going to put them down with a bottle. They're going to be like, well, what the heck? The other 5 nights, I'm getting it. So it's better to go cold turkey from night one. And for kids who have been prop dependent, what I do is I have it so that parents are in the room, but very slowly they make the transition out. So they physically move themselves from next to the crib or the bed to the middle of the room, to the doorway, until they're out. If parents stick to it consistently, it's a transition that should take about 2 weeks for that baby or that toddler to transition to. And it's not going to be easy at first. I never tell my parents that it's going to be a breeze. It's a challenge. And because you're dealing with a young baby or a toddler, it's going to be a roller coaster as well. And sometimes parents will write and say, last couple nights were great, and now all of a sudden, like, we've stepped backwards. That's okay. That's to be expected. As that child learns a new habit, things are going to go back and forth. And, you could say the same thing about changing your diet or exercising more. You start off great a couple days and then you kind of let yourself off the hook. So you have to be really consistent with whatever you've decided to do, so that you can really teach that habit to that child.
Okay. And you say about 2 weeks usually is the sort of a rough time frame to
yeah. Now, depending if I'm working with like a 2, 3, 4-year-old, that might have to be 3 weeks, just because that age group is the age group of negotiators and deal makers. Again, kids are brilliant, but they will find every possible way to try and get mom or dad in that room. And certainly in my experience, I've heard everything from vomiting to pooping their diapers. It's everything. But you have to handle it in the right way, of course. But then you just have to go back to it and say, all right, it's time to sleep now. Now, the only exception to sleeping through the night, again, would be anywhere from that 0 to 6 month range. Obviously before 3 months, there's still going to be a couple of night feeds. That's okay. Baby needs it. But from 3 to 6 months, you're really only looking at maybe 1 night feed during that time, if the baby's weight is okay. All right. So a lot of times when I'm working with parents of babies, they're like, oh, but they still need 2 or 3 night feeds. And as long as the weight is fine, you really don't need it at that point.
Okay. Brilliant. Mm-hmm. And then one other question that came in is if the baby's waking up crying in the middle of the night, any tips for helping parents with that who are struggling with that problem?
Well, when I teach a family about middle of the night wake ups, what I tell them is, first of all, just wait, okay? As soon as they start to cry, you don't necessarily have to go running in there. Now, moms and dads, they do know what the difference between a cranky cry and a vital cry is. So a vital cry is like, I need you right now, I'm in danger. And that's the cry that parents drop everything and they run. Okay. So I'm not saying necessarily ignore that. If it's truly a cry like that, you have to make sure that your baby is okay. But most babies cry in the middle of the night simply because they've woken up, they're out of a sleep cycle, and they want to go back to sleep. So again, wait. I usually recommend to families that they wait at least 10 minutes, just because that 10 minutes is usually enough time for baby to figure out how to self-soothe and get themselves back to sleep. Okay. And as parents go along, go through the sleep training program, they figure out like, yeah, that 10 minutes, they actually do need that. And by the end of 10 minutes, parents just have to roll over and go back to sleep themselves, just because baby's quiet now, baby's okay, and they've gotten themselves back to sleep. Now, after 10 minutes, if baby is still crying, of course, you're going to go in there. You have to be safe. You never know why it is they're crying. It could be that they need a diaper change. It could be any other plethora of reasons. But you have to go in and you have to make sure that baby's okay. If baby is okay, you say it's time to sleep. Let's try and go night-night or whatever it is that you say to the baby, and then you leave again. That's it. You're just going to make sure that everything is fine and that they're safe.
Okay, brilliant. And then any tips for parents just for sleep training in general? Just any general tips you'd like to share just to help parents who are going through it at the moment?
Be consistent. That's the number one thing. Whatever plan you've decided to take when it comes to sleep, you can't waver. Once you decide to make that step and sleep train and to get your baby sleeping independently through the night, you just got to go all in. Okay? Because I think a lot of parents who don't succeed with it, and usually the parents that come to me have tried it on their own, but for whatever reason haven't succeeded. And that's okay. It's not the easiest thing. But what happens is typically is that parents try it for a few nights. It's not going well. Baby's crying a lot. And then they just decide to go back to old habits. And again, that's what I'm here for. I offer accountability. I coach them through it. I get, texts saying, help, baby's still up. And I say, it's fine. It's okay. We got to work through it. But again, if you're consistent with your expectations, if you're consistent with the bedtime routine, the time they go to bed, naps, the brain and body are going to be accustomed to it. They're going to know this is when I sleep, this is when I'm awake, this is when I get the feed. And the more consistently you can follow that, the better and the more successful you're going to be.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, Melissa, thanks so much for sharing those awesome tips and for sharing your insight and experience and wisdom on this topic. And yeah, we'll put a link directly below this video for parents watching that would like to connect with you and your work on your website. And
perfect.
Yeah, is that
wonderful? And thank you so much, Chris. And again, for the parents who need the help, I'm here. I have done these consultations from parents around the world, not just locally here in Philadelphia. So it's not something that you necessarily have to meet me in person to do. I've done Skype consultations, WhatsApp, everything. So if parents are interested, yes, please visit my website. It's melissadomansleepconsulting.com. And you can also find me on Facebook as well.
Okay, awesome. Melissa, thanks so much. And it's been fascinating chatting to you about this topic, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. I was very happy to talk to you. Thank you so much.